Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another John Mahama live session. This evening I have with me a team of business and financial journalists, and of course the millions of you following and watching from across our beautiful country and across the world. Today we'll talk about the economy, and our interaction will also focus on matters of the economic growth and other statistical figures. You're welcome to send in your questions, comments, and contributions. And remember to add the hashtag John Mahama Live to all comments and questions. So thank you once again for joining me. I see my friends Eko Ramsey and all the others. You're all welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, last month, precisely on the 6th of December 2019, the board of the International Monetary Fund concluded a review of the staff report on Ghana, that is the Article 4 consultation. The staff report has been published, and it has exposed serious irregularities in government's fiscal reporting. The IMF explicitly treated the cost of the financial sector bailout as government expenditure, because that expenditure directly adds to the budget deficit and the public debt. We believe the government deliberately treated the cost of the bailout as a footnote in order to reduce the size of the deficit. This is unacceptable, and it is completely outside the acceptable fiscal framework. Quite clearly, in the IMF's estimation, Ghana's fiscal deficit position, which includes the bailout, stands at 7.0% for 2018 and is projected to remain at 7.0% by the end of the year 2019. Now, the significance of this is that it breaches government's own Fiscal Responsibility Act, and it is at variance with government's cosmetic position of 3.9% that is quoted for 2018 and a projected outturn for 2019 of 4.7%. Considering government's breaches of its own Fiscal Responsibility Act, one wonders why the president will set up a huge committee to consider the reasons for exchange rate fluctuations. He must be informed that unplanned budget deficits have a bearing on the economy and on the exchange rate depreciation. It is even worrying that this trend of falsified numbers or creative accounting seems to permeate government institutional practices. The Minority Caucus in Parliament have had cause to call out the Bank of Ghana on account of such systematic reporting failures. My brothers and sisters, notwithstanding these infractions which we pointed out in the past, we do not seek vindication, not at all. We're rather concerned about the grave consequences financial misreporting has on the authenticity, credibility, and reliability of data coming from Ghana, particularly within the financial markets. Such misreporting, as revealed by the IMF, can further read hardships that Ghanaians are currently grappling with. Meanwhile, in a two-phase manner, in the same budget, the government programmed to treat as inflows exceptional revenues such as recoveries from receiverships and proceeds from the ESLA bond. My brothers and sisters, Parliament recently approved 15 billion Ghana cedis to support the cost of the banking sector cleanup. Our estimates show that going by the reckless path this government chose with its attendant job losses and collapse of businesses, an additional 13 billion Ghana cedis will be required to complete the exercise of the financial sector clean-out. This brings the total amount needed for the bailout to about 28 billion Ghana cedis. Now, it's interesting to note, governments did not make any provision for the cost of the banking sector crisis in both the 2020 budget and the 3-year medium-term expenditure framework, the MTEF. There's no provision for the financial sector cleanup. Again, this was done to dishonestly lower the projected budget deficit and give a false picture of satisfactory fiscal performance in 2020, which is an election year. This is what a nation reaps when it has a president who thinks predominantly about the next election and not putting things right, not about the impact of his decisions on the people. Again, it had to take the IMF to give Ghana a further indication of the extent of the bailout cost in future years, a figure which the government that just exited an IMF program have been compelled to give to the fund. And so we received the figure from the fund, not from our own government. Is that to suggest that they had not planned to pay depositors who have their monies locked up following the needless closure of the banks? Or is government treating the cost as unbudgeted expenditure? Ladies and gentlemen, note that the President in his Christmas message to Ghanaians was very emphatic that all depositors will receive their locked up funds in the defunct banks in full. Emphasis mine, in full. If I may ask, on which foundation was the President's promise anchored? Was it just a vain promise? I suggest to the President that the systematic obfuscation of facts with the intention to hoodwink Ghanaians is a source of worry because it defeats the already low confidence that people have in our political system and our democracy. It is clear he cannot add to the gains. Therefore, we must not allow him to continue to subtract from it any further beyond 2020. Countrymen and women, in another vein, the IMF declined to treat the energy sector cost as amortization rather than as arrears, against what government stated in the 2020 mid-year review and the 2020 budget. This was another attempt at obfuscation. You may recall that during the 2019 mid-year budget statement, government announced its decision to treat the crystallized energy sector payments to the independent power producers as an amortization item, hence making it a below-the-line fiscal operation, and so not captured on the budget. Obligations with IPPs, estimated at 5.1 billion for 2019, is being amortized, thus increasing the requirement for external amortization above the amount originally provisioned for in the 2019 budget. This is on 9 of the budget statement, paragraph 139, unquote. Technically, as the minority in Parliament and other fiscal experts have noted, the crystallized energy liabilities directly added 5.1 billion Ghana cedis to the arrears. And therefore, the deficit, it can therefore not be treated as below the line item. It must be an above the line item. We have in the past made reference to the glossary of the Government Finance Statistics Manual of 2014 of the IMF to expose the position of government on the treatment of the energy sector payments as amortization. It is therefore not surprising that the IMF exercised its authority under Article 4 of its Constitution and declined to treat such expenditure as amortization. So if you look at the latest IMF report, it has brought the energy sector cost above the line. And that is why you see different figures between the IMS figures and the government's figures. Now, factoring and non-processing of expenditure through the gift miss to reduce budget deficits. I mentioned this several months ago in London and said that some payments were being made off gift miss in order to keep them off budget. Government has since 2018 resorted to an unorthodox way of paying government contractors, which bypasses the Ghana Integrated Financial Management System, Information System, GIFMIS, with the aim of creating the impression that they are reducing government expenditure. Government negotiated with contractors under duress to pay arrears owed them through private borrowing from Fidelity Bank and other sources. Government's liabilities to contractors were discounted at a rate between 10 and 14%. The bank took the invoice value of both current and non-current liability arrears of the contractors in return for treasury notes and bonds from the Ministry of Finance without parliamentary approval. So this is borrowing without parliamentary approval. The increased public debt and budget deficit by the size of the amount of the invoice value held by the bank. Unfortunately, the treatment of this amount outside the fiscal framework has allowed the minister to complete and neutralize the offset of about 5 billion Ghana cedis from end 2016. But this was not captured as expenditure in the fiscal framework of government in